It's a Friday morning version of the Fenway Rundown. I'm Chris Cotillo. Sean McAdam is here. If you pay close enough attention, and if you do, we appreciate it, you'll note that this is our first podcast of the week. It's been a week. Sean McAdam has been on the IL due to injury slash illness, and by that I mean illness. But Sean, after beating the flu, you're back. How are you?
Doing better, thanks, Chris. This is the first day where I feel somewhat like myself. I do not recommend the flu. It sucks. I'm here
Yeah.
to tell you.
Well, you know what? In advance of this, obviously not knowing you were going to get sick, we did have 3 episodes last week, so we had a little wiggle room to be just doing the one this week. There has been a lot that's happened in the world of baseball. There has not been a lot that has happened in the world of the Red Sox. We'll get to how those things intersect as we get underway with the pod today. So, since we last recorded, for those who remember last week, we touched on. One episode where you talked to Patrick Sandoval, heard from him. That ran Thursday afternoon, last Friday morning. You and Chris Smith revealed your Hall of Fame ballots. A lot of good discussion there. Since then, the hot stove was turned back on. There have been a lot of moves, a lot of free agent signings. A lot has happened. The Red Sox have not been involved, but kind of just big picture, the guys that have signed in that time. Roki Sasaki goes to the Dodgers, as does Tanner Scott, as does Kirby Yates, as they assemble a super bullpen on a super team. Anthony Santander, who always seems to crush the Red Sox, will continue to get that opportunity in a Blue Jays uniform. He goes from Baltimore to Toronto. We saw Jurickson Profar, after a career year, sign with the Braves yesterday. AJ Minter went to the Mets right around the last time we recorded last week. Paul Sewald goes to Cleveland. Jose Leclerc goes to Oakland as the free agent relief market heats up. And so, we've seen big names, big movement, and it is fair to say at this point, as we sit here on January 24th, and a happy birthday to my sister Kate on January 24th, we will say, the free agent market is, in fact, picked over. The big reaction, I think, league wide has been over the last week. Oh my God, look at the Dodgers. How are they doing this? If you look at the free agent list that I keep track of here. They have now signed 4 of the top 15 with Sasaki, Snell, Teoscar Hernandez, and Tanner Scott joining a team that just won the World Series somewhat easily. What is your reaction to the moves the last week? First, in relation to the Red Sox and where they stand at this point.
Yeah, well, I mean, you and I think, had both advocated for a stronger, more aggressive pursuit of Tanner Scott. Some people were not okay with giving 18 to $20 million a year for a back end reliever. To me, I would have been okay with that. The kind of impact he has, the fact that he'd give them one more swing and miss guy out there in the back end of the bullpen in the eighth and ninth inning, I think would have been a huge boost. And they clearly need two more things going forward. They need another impact arm for the eighth or ninth inning, and still they need a right-handed bat. And as you have just noted, with all the transactions and signings that have gone on in the last week or so, the choices are getting thinner, and there are fewer options available to them. It now looks like Alex Bregman could end up staying in Houston. The Astros are trying to get creative with their payroll, maybe move Ryan Presley to save some money. That would free up a increased offer to retain Bregman.
Maybe move
I'm
Altuve to left. Like, there's a lot going on there.
right, right. I'm okay passing on Bregman. I've not been as strong on him as some others. I think a 6-year commitment to someone who's going on 32 and already showing some offensive decline is not a good decision. So I'm okay if they don't get Bregman, but they need a plan B, whether that be a trade or a free agent signing. I was always more in favor of Nolan Arenado over Alex Bregman because Arenado upgrades your infield defense at third. It's a shorter commitment of 3 years that you can outlast a little bit and not be tied to and have it anchor your payroll for 6 or 7 years down the road. but clearly there's work to do here with, less than 3 weeks before pitchers and catchers.
Yeah, on that, I think we've just heard so little about Arenado in the 3 weeks or so since we um, had reported that that was a preferred destination, or here was a preferred and is a preferred destination for him. He hasn't moved. Mozeliak saying it's still their priority to try to move him, but obviously they haven't come to terms with Bregman. I think the reporting on this has been all over the place from national, local guys in different places. It's been, I think, kind of a crapshoot what to believe, what not to believe, and that's kind of how it sometimes works with Boris clients. I think you look at Jared Carabas, a guy that both of us worked with briefly at previous spots, and he obviously has been clear that he's knows what's going on in this situation. And from what he said, the Red Sox have not been aggressors. They have not gotten involved. They have not gotten involved at the level Bregman wants them to. And I think, a lot of that points back to that report during the winter meetings from you that was so easily dismissed by people in the organization. Of course it would be. It was a bad look. But like the whole idea of Sam and Alex Cora wanting him and Craig Breslow in the front office not, like that seems to kind of have played out in what they've offered so far. And at the end of the day, like I don't know how many times we have to go through this with different free agents and fans and media members taking the bait on different things. Like all the stuff from Fenway Fest, let's think about it. Alex Cora says Alex Bregman could be a Gold Glove second baseman. Trevor Story says he'd love Nolan Arenado to come play. Like, that stuff is all well and good. It does not matter unless a deal can be reached. With Bregman, it's money. With the Cardinals on Arenado, it's prospect package and money and some combination there. Bregman probably does want to come here. Alex Cora clearly badly wants him. Sam Kennedy seems like he does based on your reporting. But if they don't offer him as much as another team, say the Tigers, or now that the Astros are back in, then what's the point? Like, it doesn't matter that all these people want the pieces to fit together. It's just, it comes down to money. And so I've always kind of been with you at the beginning of the offseason. I thought, it's kind of a weird fit. You're kind of blocking Campbell. He is, despite having the repertoire, the track record he has, an amazing career so far and a leader and all that. I, preferred other right-handed options. We talked about that. Teoscar and Tyler O'Neill, we both talked about as guys we would rather have seen them sign. Now I'm kind of stuck between agreeing with you that he's not the ideal guy to give the 6-year commitment to, but at the same time, they have the money.
Who
and
else?
It's got to go somewhere,
Right.
And I also am not as high on the Arenado possibility as I've outlined because I don't love the idea of trading Casas if you have to do that. But if you look at it, like it's those two or what? Randall Grichuk, which I'm actually starting to sell myself on from a performance perspective, but you're not going to get close to the CBT by signing him. So I think they're in a place where they have a clear need and they have money to spend and imperfect fits. And that's kind of what made me feel like, based on, not just kind of a gut feel, but what we were hearing and what I was hearing about, high dollar pursuits, especially pertaining to the free agent, to the relief market, that they would be willing to overpay for a reliever just because they can and they could. But with Scott off the market and with Yates off the market, those options are dwindling as well. So, like, it's hard to envision now them hitting the CBT. We can get into the longer discussions on successful offseason versus not. I mean, if you look at what they did in December, I think we both thought Crochet and Buehler were great additions and could be talked into Chapman helping the bullpen. But now, they've gotten to a point where their early moves were good and they allowed you to go out and spend in January. And so far, that hasn't happened at all.
Yeah, we kept waiting for the proverbial other shoe to drop, right? They addressed the
and
rotation.
It still can. 2+ weeks before pitchers and catchers.
Well, yeah, it can, but the options, as you noted, are dwindling, and they're less appetizing than they were only a couple of weeks ago. As regards the right-handed bat, I'm probably going to hammer this point on a pretty regular basis. To me, the first misstep of the offseason was not offering Tyler O'Neill the qualifying offer.
Yeah.
It was imperfect.
We have our obsessions here on the Fenway Rundown. Sean's is O'Neill, mine is Teoscar.
And I would have preferred Teoscar, obviously. But they would have saved themselves a boatload of trouble if they had just overpaid O'Neill by, 15%.
Hmm.
He ended up getting whatever it was, 16 and a half, 17 million AAV from the Orioles. If you pay him $21 million, your right-handed pop is taken care of for 2025. You buy time for Anthony and Campbell to graduate to the big leagues and start to have an impact. You didn't want to get into a long-term commitment with a guy whose injury history is what his is. But this is a guy who hit well in Fenway. He led them in homers and missed a third of the season.
Right.
And it would have been a simple band-aid for 1 year. Not everything's got to be long-term and building down the road.
And you know
Plug and
what?
plug and play for
Yeah, to completely
2025.
interrupt, that is what they've done with that right-handed mercenary role dating back like 10 plus
Hunter
years.
Renfro.
You
Yeah.
covered Cody Ross. I mean, think about even going back to them. A terrible, terrible team. I know you had fun covering Bobby V, but others didn't. You look at Cody Ross, but then you look at Hunter Renfro for the 1 year. Adam Duvall had a pretty good year here 2 years ago. They've tried it even, not the same kind of mold, but Justin Turner from the right side for 1 year. His swing played at Fenway. He brought the leadership and all that. Like you've seen now, you can name five different guys. O'Neill being one of the best last year. They tried even with Tommy Pham at the deadline a couple years ago. These guys that could mash. Maybe that's just the organizational strategy that for the right-handed bat we can get it and we can get it cheap for 1 year. That to me is kind of what the thought about Randall Grichuk, who's still out there, could be. But at the same time, again, there were the two easier paths there with
Yeah,
O'Neill and
and
Teoscar.
Grichuk doesn't offer them the thump that O'Neill did.
Yeah.
In no world does Randall Grichuk hit 31 home runs in 2025 at
He did in
Fenway.
2019.
Uh, do you think that's happening in 2025?
He had 16 homer
Do
last.
you think that's happening in 2025?
No, the last 3 years,
Okay.
19, we played 140 games for the Rockies that year. And then in 2023, 16, 8 with the Rockies, 8 with the Angels. Last year, 279 plate appearances. He had 12 homers, but he did have an 875 OPS, and he did mash lefties, something he has done
Yeah, he's a nice complementary player.
throughout his career.
I've been saying to you, he's a better Rob Refsnyder.
Yeah.
That's how I look at Randall Grichuk.
And like Austin Hayes is also out there and maybe kind of in this boat too as a buy low guy. But I mean, we're talking about the same group of players that's not going to get you close to where you people expected you to spend. And then the question becomes like, as we were a podcast, I would say Fairly was obsessed with spending last year because they decided not to spend and set a cap for themselves for no reason. That became evident. If you look at, all the moves, the picture made sense. Verdugo for O'Neill was a good move, but it also saved money. Chris Sale was a salary dump in a couple ways because Grissom and it meant they didn't have to spend at second base. Giolito becomes their one side. We've been through all this, the CBT stuff a billion times. Can it be a good offseason if you don't spend? When you make the biggest trade in baseball and you get probably the best pitcher available and he's only making 4 million next year, okay, that's a lot better of a start than you got off to last year. And then you do the Bueller deal, which is effectively the Giolito deal, and you add Chapman. So I'd say okay, that's more progress, but without a Crochet extension and without a free agent batter, free agent
Which, to
reliever.
be fair, we wouldn't necessarily expect to have happened by now.
Right. But I'm just saying,
and I think both of us expect that Garrett Crochet gets extended before opening day. If he doesn't, then they've misstepped here. But go ahead.
So, but as we sit here the great Felger and Mass say, we have a show to do today. At this point, on January 24th, they were, if you look at the offseason as a race, they were, on pace, I think, for everything that you would look and want them to do in terms of, they went up, they paid for a reliever in Chapman before the relief market got off. They made that was kind of an aggressive move in the very beginning of December. They got Crochet, they got Bueller. The rotation looks great potentially if everybody stays healthy and hits the upside. And you get to New Year's and you think there's a lot of guys left, there's money to spend. Okay, they're in a good place. They're keeping pace, and the way they've set things up, they still have money to spend. Now that we sit here on January 24th, and there has literally been one transaction, Blake Sable in January, I think there is reason for some fans to worry. But of course, we can't judge the whole picture until the Bregmans, the Arenados, or whoever, Pete Alonso, even though he's not coming here, are off the board.
Yeah, I mean, holes to fill and time starting to run out and many fewer options on the board.
Let's talk about a couple of the guys that did come off, plus a guy whose market is heating up. All the talk has been about Bregman. Where do did you look at, and there was really not a lot of smoke on these guys, but Santander, Jerickson Profar, who the Red Sox really didn't have interest in, and then Pete Alonso as fits here. Do any of those kind of pique your interest at all?
No, in a word, Santander was an overpay by a very desperate team in Toronto that had to do something, that has been waving money at free agents unsuccessfully for a couple of years. You name the big name, they've been in on them every time they've lost out. They had to get somebody, and they finally got Santander. Not a bad switch hitter offensively.
44 homers last year.
Right, right. Look, could he have helped? Uh, could he have helped here? Well, to the degree that you could maybe hide him in left field for a couple of years, or get somebody to take Yoshida's contract and DH him full time. Yeah, that's an upgrade, I guess. But I don't want to look at what that deal looks like at 35 and 36, which isn't that far away. That's a long commitment for a guy who's limited defensively, who doesn't get on base a whole lot. Yeah, he provides some pop, and that could help, but I thought that was an overpay. Jerickson Profar, no thank you. Had a terrific year last year, but it came out of nowhere for a guy that has sort of been an underachiever his whole career, going back to his time with Texas. Finally figured some things out last year with the Padres, cashed in on a 3-year, $42 million deal with Atlanta. The Braves don't usually make a lot of questionable moves. I think this one is, for a team that literally had not signed a major league free agent this year. That seems an odd guy to jump in on in late January. And Alonso just isn't a fit here. They've got Casas. If you're going to move Devers to accommodate somebody, whether it's Arenado or somebody else, Alonso just doesn't fit. I don't think you want to bring him in to solely DH. I think players who are primarily first basemen with not a lot of athleticism getting into their 30s, we've seen the track record there. It's not good. Those guys age quickly. The fact that the Mets, who know him best and for whom he has the most value, have essentially walked away from him speaks volumes. So all three of those guys are problematic in my mind.
Yeah, I would say just in terms of, both Alonso and Bregman, like it seems like those guys are so, entrenched there in those organizations. They've been one of the faces or the face of those organizations for years. They both spent their whole career in those places. Like I think as Tim Healy, who covers the Mets, wrote yesterday, in terms of an Alonso Mets breakup, I'll see it when I believe it, and like I am totally on board with that. Like, oh, the Blue Jays are interested and they're pushing, and with Bregman, the Tigers and the Red Sox and the Astros, like those are the types of free agent processes that you call the team, you say, do you have a final offer? You'll match. They do, and then it's just like a song and dance before re-signing. To me, I don't have any inside information that either of them is going to, but I'm not surprised at all that this Bregman Houston thing has resurfaced. Crane does impulsive stuff all the time, and he knows the value. He's hearing it from inside the clubhouse, apparently, down there. Altuve's apparently, come up with the idea to move to left to accommodate. I mean, it's just I see one, if not both of those guys, re-signing, and that puts the teams that are interested in them in an even tougher position. You wrote today a column that I totally agree with for your big comeback on your Friday Notebook, that the Dodgers, on what the Dodgers have done, the Dodgers deserve praise, not scorn, for their approach. The whole world has been complaining about the Dodgers for the last 7, 8 days, or 10 years, whatever you want to characterize it. I think, somebody had a really, really, really good line, and I forget who it was, so I can't cite properly on Twitter. When it comes to Sasaki, the whole idea of, if you are the best shopper in a store for the course of 10 years and you buy all the luxury items, occasionally as a thank you, you get a freebie thrown in. And that's what Roki Sasaki kind of, was. That's their reward for going out and doing these mega deals and doing everything they have. They set up their organization to a place where he was willing to come there, and they were the favorites all along. So no surprise there. I think people more angry about Scott and Yates. Your point is that the Dodgers are the model franchise. Everybody should be trying to do what they're doing. The counterpoint people have is their salary cap, salary floor, all this type of stuff. Look, let's just break it down very simply for people on a local level. If the Red Sox offered Tanner Scott 4 for 80, he'd probably be in a Red Sox uniform. Like there's a lot of deferrals and all these deals are doing. The Red Sox offered him 4 for 80 present day, which that's a lot for a reliever. I'm not necessarily arguing that they should. We both think he'd be a good fit. They obviously have, in the words of the great Gerard Mayo, cash to burn. But I think that like you could have outbid, whether it's them, whether it's the Cubs who came in at 4 for 66 at the end, and the Mets who, pivoted to Minter. Like that's one case. Kirby Yates deal pending physical. We don't have the terms yet. Probably a 2 year deal. Like, okay, let's say that's 2 for 26. If you offer 2 for 30, maybe it's an overpay, but you get the player, right? Like it's just you're allowed. There's
Well,
29
and
teams that are
it's
allowed to
funny
outbid
that
them.
it's funny that you're talking about maybe overpaying a little bit, but Andrew Friedman, who was, of course, the mastermind behind the Dodgers' success over these last dozen or so years, is fond of saying, uh, you know, if you don't overpay once in a while on free agents, you're always going to finish third.
Mhm.
You know, at some point you got to do some things that are a little uncomfortable.
A
The
lot
Dodgers are at
uncomfortable,
a pardon me.
or a lot uncomfortable.
Well, yeah, but the Dodgers are at a place now where, and part of this is culture, part of this is geography, part of this is climate. Like you and I are on record as being absolute Dodger Stadium fans and what a
Yep.
great environment it is. And who wouldn't want to play for the Dodgers right now? You're essentially guaranteeing yourself a spot in the NLCS at minimum for the next 5 years. So if you sign a 4 or 5 year deal, you're like, I got a decent chance to win 2 World Series in these next 4 or 5 years. They do everything right. They pick and choose which players to retain. They don't trade the wrong prospects for the most part. They continue to develop well. They have an awesome international program. They are essentially Tokyo West now. Any Japanese player
Well,
is
Tokyo
making a
East, right?
well, no, I mean the US is the Western Hemisphere, right?
Well, if you're thinking
Let's
about
not
where,
debate that. It's
if you're
true.
thinking of where Tokyo is
Yeah,
on
but
the
we're in the
globe,
Western Hemisphere.
but that's a long journey going west to get there. You would
Okay,
travel
you're
east.
you're you're getting off track, and
You
you're
would though travel east. Go ahead.
thank you. Uh,
The flu really screws you up.
the Dodgers do everything right, and it's no surprise that people want to play there. And guess what? That could happen here if Red Sox ownership wanted it to. They have the history, they have the legacy franchise, and they have the resources, but they've chosen not to. Now, if John Henry has done anything smart the last couple of years, it's that he hasn't articulated some of the ridiculous stuff that his counterpart in Chicago, Tom Ricketts, has, who continues to say, like, well, we're just trying to break even
Oh
here.
no, you're wrong because he has. He said baseball players are
Yeah,
expensive and
right.
all that stuff.
I'm
So
not saying he hasn't had
yeah.
missteps when he's talked about,
Mhm.
uh, payroll and money, but not to the extent that Ricketts has.
Right.
When you own the Cubs and they're now worth nearly $5 billion, nobody wants to hear that the best you can hope for is to break even from a financial standpoint. That's a load of crap. He knows it. Everybody who's a Cubs fan or a baseball fan knows it. And I have no problem with what the Dodgers are doing. If you're a baseball fan, if you're a sports fan of any league, any sport, you want your ownership behaving the way the Dodgers are. They are flexing their financial might to put the best product on the field possible. Who could argue with that? You can be envious of them. You could say, gee, I wish my ownership would do that. But to criticize them for spending too much, why are people trying to protect the spending of billionaire owners like it's
Mhm.
their own money? I don't get that one. The Dodgers should be, as I said, hailed instead of scorned.
Yeah, it's just, jealousy. And that's really what it comes down to from a lot of places, and probably rightfully so. And it just shows the other owners should act that way. We'll have plenty of time to uncover the next labor dispute, which obviously this kind of goes hand in hand with. But I'm in total agreement. Like the Dodgers deserve credit. Good for them. In baseball, it's not a guarantee they're going to win the World Series, but it sure looks like they're going to be the favorite. We'll just talk briefly, kind of make predictions as we sit here on January 24th, a week and 2 days out from Truck Day. I'll name you the best available free agents, and then we'll talk about who we actually expect the Red Sox to land. Make it that simple. Left on the market: Alex Bregman, Pete Alonso, Jack Flaherty, Carlos Estevez, Andrew Heaney. Old friend Nick Pivetta, Jose Quintana, Max Scherzer, Kyle Gibson, Tommy Kahnle, Hassan Kim, David Robertson, Harrison Bader, Spencer Turnbull. Old friends Kenley Jansen and JD Martinez, Clayton Kershaw, old friend Justin Turner, Lance Lynn, Jacob Junis, Randall Grichuk, Brendan Rodgers, Austin Hayes. That's kind of where the list ends. You can kind of rule out the starters. So if I'm going to make a prediction here, and it's not going to be one Red Sox fans are going to love, I'm going to predict no on Arenado and no on Bregman, and that it ends up being, Grichuk and either David Robertson or Kahnle.
Yeah, I mean, there's a history with Kahnle there the last few years. They've been in on him. And, he's pitched in the AL East, had some success. Wouldn't surprise me to be the last bullpen piece. And in terms of the right-handed bat, yeah, Grichuk makes, profiles kind of what they're looking for, a shorter commitment on a guy that's essentially a glorified platoon player who can help a little bit, but isn't the impact bat that's going to really make that lineup any more formidable than it is. It's a 10% upgrade when there were alternatives out there that would have really moved the needle, but those guys are either gone or close to gone and heading elsewhere.
And we will obviously have all of that covered on the site and on the pod next week, back to our regular programming. To wrap up here, we want to just touch on the Hall of Fame. You heard Sean's ballot. He voted for the three who got in and many more. Included today in the Friday MLB Notebook, some thoughts from Jonathan Papelbon on Billy Wagner. Go check that out on the site. CC Sabathia makes it as the first ballot guy, which we expected. Ichiro falls one vote short, which we'll touch on, and Billy Wagner makes it. Beltran and Andrew Jones fall short. Dustin Pedroia way short, but stays on the ballot. To me, maybe if there was a surprise, it was that Beltran and Andrew Jones, didn't get over the hump. Sure seems like they will next year, but kind of, what we expected when we talked about it a week ago.
Yeah, I don't think any real surprises. If you had said, predict what's going to happen, I would have chosen those three to make it and the other two to put themselves, the other two being Beltran and Andrew Jones, put themselves in good position to make it next year. It's been discussed that the first timers on next year's ballot are no threat to be elected as first time.
It's like Cole Hamels and Ryan Braun.
Yeah. So that's going to help put the spotlight on guys like Jones and Beltran. Beltran is a shoe-in to make it, given the progress he's made in 3 years. Andrew is starting to run out of time, but he's got 2 more shots, and I think he makes it, if not next year, then the year after. So I'm glad, as I've said, I've championed him from year one. I think he's deserving, and I think he eventually will get in. I'm glad that Pedroia got enough to come back on the ballot and get more consideration. I do not, as I've written and said, believe in strategic voting, so I wasn't going to vote for him, just keep him on the ballot, but I'm glad enough did legitimately vote for him to get a longer look. look, we can't rule out that Pedroia will someday make it. If you want to look at Scott Rowland's first year was below what Pedroia got in his first year. I think Rowland was just over 10%.
And Wagner
Pedroia
was
got,
right around there too, I think.
pardon me?
I think Wagner was right around there too.
Yep, yep. So, there is a building of cases, but glad that he is not going to be a one and done. So we'll see how that goes.
And on Ichiro not getting the
Yeah,
unanimous
I
vote.
look. It's to state the obvious. It's inexcusable to me that somebody would not vote for Ichiro, and I don't care what the reasoning is. I don't care if it's no position player has ever been unanimous before, and we're not going to start now. That's dumb. Babe Ruth, Ted Williams, Hank Aaron, Willie Mays, Stan Musial, they didn't get unanimous acclamation, so I'm not going to do it with anybody. That's dumb. I want to make sure that other people stay on the ballot, and I know Ichiro is going to get in, so I'm not going to vote for him, even though he deserves it. That's dumb. We don't know who it is, and we don't know the reasoning. Frankly, at this point, I think we should stop paying attention to whoever it is that's looking for attention, if indeed that was the goal of the person. Could be a man, could be a woman. We don't know. Don't know if that person's gonna be identified. But I think we should stop hand wringing over the fact that out of 394 voters, only 393 voted the right way. As Joel Sherman, who we both have great respect for, has said, look, you can't get people to agree on what day of the week it is. What are the odds that you're going to get 394 people to agree on whether someone's an all-time immortal in the sport of baseball? I say we leave it at that. I thought Ichiro was tremendously gracious in his talk, saying, hey, if I knew that person was, I'd sit down and have a drink with them. There's no bitterness. And I think that actually the public gets more upset about this lack of unanimity than the players do. Um, I don't think Ichiro is hanging his head today saying, oh, I missed out on a chance of history. He's happy that he went in overwhelmingly on his first try and will be recognized forever in a Baseball Hall of Fame. And that's what we should focus on, not the motives behind somebody who made obviously a stupid decision.
Right. And the person was not Sean McAdam. It was not Chris Smith, and it wasn't me because I don't have a vote. So I'm definitely absolved here. That's the Fenway Rundown for today. We'll be back next week.